All right, welcome to a live edition of On Texas Football. It's Monday. That means we're down at the 40 acres for the Steve Sarkisian press conference and Texas player availability. He's CJ Vogel. I'm Jeff Howell. We'll have plenty of reactions from throughout the day. We've got some Sark clips to play for you here in just a minute. This live edition of On Texas Football is brought to you by Duck Camp. Tell you about our friends at Duck Camp here momentarily. CJ, we heard from Sark. We heard from Arch, a few players. What's standing out to you now that we've wrapped up Monday on the 40 acres? Putting San Jose State in the rearview mirror, looking ahead to Saturday's game against UTEP.
Yeah, I think a lot of it continues the theme of what we've talked about post game. Texas, 5 touchdowns from Arch Manning, 38 points from the offense, 31-point victory in total, but plenty to work on, right? And whether it's the offensive line, whether it's Arch Manning, whether it's the wide receivers on the outside with the perimeter blocking or just catching the football, there's plenty to work on, especially on that side of the football. Sarkisian spoke about it today. Look, too many penalties, and we'll talk about that as well, Jeff. But altogether, it was nice to see one go through the hoop. You have a one in the win column now. Now it's about building and preparing yourself for SEC play, which is coming up pretty quickly as we head into week 3 now.
Yeah, a ton of talk, CJ, about penalties, and 12 penalties for 115 yards. In Sark's tenure, it's the second most penalized game Texas has had, the second most penalty yards Texas has been assessed. That mess of a game in 2022 in Stillwater against Oklahoma State has the high in Sark's tenure for both of those. And, Sark mentioned it after the game, CJ, and going back and watching it, and he talked about it again today. It's not just the young guys or the inexperienced guys that are making mistakes. It's Ryan Wingo, it's Colin Simmons, it's a veteran offensive lineman like Cole Hudson, DJ Campbell's a veteran. Basically, it sounds, CJ, and Arch did mention today that they ran a little bit extra after practice. Maybe they just got to start making more of a point of emphasis not to commit penalties, have consequences for penalties in practice, so that way you're not committing them when you get to game day.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Look, and Sark normally does a fine job of pointing out one or two areas that Texas really emphasizes in the week of practice, and then the week after you see them really start to put that emphasis to display, right? This past week it was creating turnovers. Well, what did Texas do immediately? It was create 4 turnovers, and guys were punching, at the football and some face mask just a little bit in terms of, just trying to dislodge the ball. But I'm sure this weekend – right behind me at practice will be a full week of practice saying, hey, we got to clean up the penalties. Texas is 120th in the country in penalties. They're 126th in penalty yards, and there's only 136 teams in the FBS. So that's pretty bad, Jeff. We talked about it with Colin Simmons and the way that he's pressing perhaps just a little bit too much, in which that's also been a common theme from what we've heard from Sarkisian. The holding on the outside, Texas jumping off sides a couple times. Look, you got to clean that up. But at times, I think that there are guys looking to take that step and trying to force that next step in their play rather than letting it come organically through development in their play on the field. Also, on Colin Simmons, Sark said that, yeah, he might be leading the country in penalties with 5. He said that probably not what he expected to be leading the country in after two weeks. So a lot to clean up, and it's all on that penalty front, Jeff.
Yeah, I think what Sark said about Colin Simmons can also be applied to Ryan Wingo and can be applied to a few other guys. Look, you're not going to get 10 sacks on one play, and you're not going to have 1,000-yard season as a receiver on one play or on one game. You just kind of got to let the game come to you. And you mentioned it, CJ. We'll hear this is the first Sark clip we'll hear. This is about scheme versus fundamentals, and Sark was talking about maybe this coaching staff, that's been together for a long time, save for a few pieces. Maybe in practice, they need to start going back and leaning more on fundamentals and technique rather than scheme. I thought this was a really good answer right here by Sark.
Varying game plans. What I like about our offense right now, I think these guys are coachable. When we make an emphasis on things to improve upon, whether it's individual players or as a unit, they've responded. We obviously challenged Arch from one week to the next. I think he responded. And there's growing pains still in there. When we challenged him on, creating more explosive plays, breaking more tackles, I think our guys have responded to that. Now, we need to be more consistent. We need to take practice to the game. I think the details in our offense need to improve. But again, we've got some, I hate saying young players. We have some new faces, and there's going to be some growing pains. I wasn't naive to that, to think we were just going to be a well-oiled machine the first month of the season. But I want to see incremental growth. And there were some errors Saturday that need to improve. Our third down pass protection needs to improve, not from a physical standpoint, but schematically of understanding the stresses on our protections, and then who's responsible for those things when they arrive. And we've had a couple breakdowns now through 2 weeks that we need to improve upon. So, they know we have good coaches, and our players know we are going to scheme people up, and we're going to scheme up free blitzers. We're going to scheme up coverages to disguise and get hands on balls. We're going to scheme up plays to get people open down the field. I don't want our players relying on the scheme. I want our players relying on their fundamentals, their techniques, their details, and their effort. That coupled with scheme, that's when we become really dangerous. And so as coaches, maybe we pull back a little bit on scheme and we get back to fundamentals, technique, effort, details of how we execute plays. Then we can put those two things back together. And I think that's when we'll be at our best as a team.
CJ Sark hinted at something there that I'm trying to write about over at ontexasfootball.com, hopefully for this afternoon. But, you watch other games across the country. You watch other teams across the country. I mean, obviously we all saw Florida lose to USF in the Swamp, saw Clemson struggle with Troy. James Franklin said a 34-0 win over FIU for Penn State. They made it harder than it should have been at times. And Kirby Smart wasn't happy with Georgia's game with Austin Peay. There were weather delays in there, but you look 28-6, probably not what you expect. CJ, how much of this is just the fact that Texas, like a lot of teams across the country that we consider championship contenders, are dealing with the same stuff while at the same time? And I see some stuff in the chat too. The fact of the matter is they understand there's a standard to play to and they're not playing to it, but you've also got some youth and inexperience early in the year that you're trying to work with. It's an interesting balance right now, not just with Texas, but a lot of teams that you see at the top of the AP poll.
Yeah, I think it's twofold, right? You can do that. You can use the measuring stick of what's going on elsewhere around the country, but I don't think that's going to help you internally of what's going on behind the scenes, right? You got to play by your own scoreboard, and that's what Sarkisian mentioned as well. But ultimately, look, I think, again, there are plenty of areas that Texas needs to improve upon. Extended number of drives, running the football effectively. On top of that, sustaining third downs, keeping ahead of the chains is something Texas was horrible at. So again, plenty of opportunities there, but there are plenty of growing pains that we continue to talk about. And yes, new quarterbacks across the country, we're seeing it firsthand. That takes some time to get fully up to speed after a long layoff, especially early in the season. And whether it's Florida, whether it's Alabama getting smoked week one, there are plenty of games that you can point to and say it takes a long time for teams to get fully up to speed with what they hope to be in a given year. But again, for Texas, it's about what they are doing by themselves. And again, plenty of opportunity for them to clean that up over the next 2 weeks. And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here. I know it might come off as such, but Texas did take a step in the right direction. That is a big positive for the Longhorns. Now it's about tidying up those little things once again and getting closer and closer to what we've seen over the last 2 years with a team that's made it to the Final Four in all of college football.
I think this is something I've had to wrap my head around too, CJ. With a lot of teams, improvement isn't linear. And some of the best Texas teams we've seen, the improvement was linear. Maybe it's just not going to be that with this team. Maybe there will be stops and starts. The hope is at some point that they hit their stride. But right now, I think, again, a lot of the identity of this team is really starting to form. They're trying to figure out who they are. Before we do anything else here on this live edition of On Texas Football, again, recapping the Steve Sarkisian press conference on a Monday, I want to thank our sponsor for this live edition. It is Duck Camp. Duck Camp makes gear for folks who live for being out there, whether out there is in a duck blind at sunrise or on the 40 acres for a Saturday kickoff. Born right here in Austin, Duck Camp builds best-in-class hunting and fishing apparel that works just as well for a full day in the field as it does for a long day of tailgating. From sun protection shirts that keep you cool during those early season scorchers, which you're going to need one of those on Saturday most likely, to their iconic game series hats that feel like instant classics, Duck Camp gear is ready for football season, hunting season, and every season in between. Get out there, stay out there, and hook 'em. Shop duckcamp.com today. And again, thanks to our friends at Duck Camp for sponsoring this edition of On Texas Football. We've already seen some people address it, CJ, in the chat. So Sark was asked about Arch's grimaces Is he hurt? The clickbait farmers had a really, really good time with this over the weekend, but Arch did his best to shut it down on Saturday, but I think Sark kind of took care of that day. This is what Sark had to say about that earlier today.
And he seemed to be having some throwing pains by the
According to
fourth quarter.
who?
Arch?
Arch said that to you?
No.
Oh, according to who?
It just looked like he was.
He doesn't have any.
Is there an explanation to why it looked like that?
I don't know. I've never filmed any of you guys when you're using the bathroom, so I don't know what faces you make when you're doing that.
CJ, here's the bottom line. Whether there's something wrong with Arch or not, there's no way we're getting an answer in a press conference setting anyway. So, I mean, I know that the questions have to be asked, but I don't know if it's people looking for a reason as to why Arch just hasn't set the world on fire through the first two games, but I just keep going back to kind of what keeps my mind easy about Arch's development. Any Texas quarterback worth their salt, it didn't just click instantly. It's been a slow burn, and it's just taken maybe a little longer than I think maybe some people expected it to take with Arch.
Yeah, and that's probably the case because, again, we've seen at times mechanics and technique have kind of failed him on throws that necessarily should be made. Against Ohio State, it was kind of the sidearm delivery on a few crossing throws there. This past week, obviously, he skipped Ryan Wingo on about a 15-yard over route. And again, you go back and you look, you see the grimace, but I don't think it's anything to do with the shoulder. I think, for better or for worse, the Mannings just make that face. And that's been going on for about 20 years in the world of football. So it's not necessarily new there. Arch denied having any type of shoulder pain. Sark denied it twice over the last 72 hours or so about shoulder pains for Arch. And you go back and you watch that throw specifically to Ryan Wingo, you see Arch open up with his front foot and try and throw across his body again. He just pulls the throw. It's all mechanical in the sense that can be cleaned up. And why, again, do I not believe that there's anything in the shoulder that is an issue at the moment for Arch Manning? Second play of the game, he threw a ball 60 yards in the air. You don't do that if your shoulder's dinged up. On the opposite side of that, he had a rollout to Ryan Wingo in which the ball traveled 48 yards through the air, rolling to his left, throwing against his body, overthrows Wingo in the end zone. You don't do that if your shoulder is messed up, and he's been able to make throws vertically down the field that, quite frankly, have looked pretty good, Jeff.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to leave it. Let's talk about the Texas offensive line because Sark, after the game, CJ, on Saturday, did not sound happy with the run game at all. He said the jury's still out on how good Texas is going to be running the ball. I think the question phrased to him was, are you getting what you want out of the run game? And I think he said it's a work in progress, or remain to be seen. Jury's out. But Sark talked about the offensive line today. Was talking about the different looks that San Jose State was showing. They run some, they were smaller. There were a lot more movement. So after getting to go back and watch the offensive line, this is what Sark talked about those guys up front today.
I thought in week one, we played pretty good against that group. Two very different style of defenses, where Ohio State was a big, physical, traditional, it's mano a mano, and you got to block really good people right in front of you. San Jose State was smaller. They were quicker. They were moving every snap. We totally lost our fundamentals. We got on our toes. We were falling over ourselves. We gave up way too much penetration. And that we have to know what we're playing against. And then you have to take it to practice. Every opponent's different. It's like you got to wipe the slate clean on a Monday morning. Here we go. Here's the scouting report. Here's what they're good at. Here's maybe what they're not so good at. Here's how we're going to try to exploit them. Here's the guy that I'm lining up across the majority of the game. Here's his strengths. Here's his weaknesses. How am I going to play him? I didn't think we carried enough information into the game and applied it up front. And so to me, I think that showed a little bit of our immaturity up front Saturday, that it wasn't the same game. It was a different game. You can't play it the same. And so, that's something where I think we need to grow this week and learn and understand of who's my opponent, what are they trying to do to me, how are they trying to beat me, and then how am I going to combat that within the ball game.
CJ, the line there that really got me was we didn't take enough information into the game and applied it. I don't think that's Sark necessarily calling out Kyle Flood. I think he's just saying, hey, maybe this offensive line You've had a veteran group the last few years. You've still got a group that's getting used to playing with each other. And speaking of that, I actually liked your question today about the Neto Mazzullo, Connor Stroh kind of rotation at left guard. I'll let you get into that. And again, just keep it in mind that this offensive line, this will only still be their third game playing together, this group as it's currently constructed.
Yeah, I think one of the big things for Sark here is getting the offensive line to understand that things change up front, especially when playing Texas. We heard about it all season a year ago that, it was probably the first 6 games of the year where teams threw out brand new front sevens. They threw out brand new schematic coverage schemes that threw Texas for a loop. And that's why you didn't see the big time starts that we like to see early on in games. And well, with that offensive line, you're able to mask that with experience, with guys that have played a lot of football. Not necessarily the case here. And Texas did not run the ball all too well. At least not to what I think that they were expecting on Saturday. But a lot of credit to San Jose State because they made life difficult for a younger offensive line, an inexperienced offensive line. The big thing there is you can't attack every single math problem the same way, right? You got to read the signs of what's in front of you. Are you adding? Are you dividing? Are you multiplying? What's going on here? That's what Texas, in my opinion, did not do a great job at on Saturday. With stunts, with twists, with personnel packages. But to that left guard spot, look, we've seen Texas rotate at the guard position a number of times, whether it be right guard with Cole Hudson and DJ Campbell over the last few years. We're going to see that again over the next few weeks and probably for the duration of the season, Jeff, with Connor Stroh and Neto Mazzullo. It was a pretty even split, with Connor Stroh also getting some snaps at right guard as DJ Campbell got nicked up at some point during the game. He is okay, by the way, but for Sark, essentially manufacturing that experience early on in the season is all that he can ask for with those two guys, and it continues to be a focal point for what he hopes to instill with that offensive line as a whole.
Yeah, we'll get to an injury update here in just a second, but the offensive line, when we did our game grades, which were published live on the channel on Sunday morning, you, CJ, myself, Coach Shipley, I think we were pretty harsh on the offensive line, but I think it was warranted, and we heard some of that in Sark's response today, where that group, they just lacked something. I don't know if sense of urgency, juice, oomph, whatever you want to call it, just wasn't quite cranked up the level where you needed the offensive line play to be on Saturday. It just seemed like just a sluggish day from that group and kind of a sluggish day offensively overall. And again, you pointed out earlier, CJ, we can look at other teams across the country that's happening to. I don't think anybody paying attention to this program really cares about that. They want to see Texas start clicking on all 8 cylinders, and hopefully that happens right behind us here on Saturday against UTEP. Let's get to that injury report. No update today on DeAndre Moore. Sark did address Trey Wisner, CJ, and we'll talk about a couple other guys after we hear from Sark.
Hey, I'd probably say today is doubtful. I'm not ruling him out, but I'd say it's doubtful. Again, I'm at this juncture of the season, I'm just not in a rush to push guys back out there if they're not as close to 100% or even closer. Like I just know how long this thing goes, and I know what it's going to look like in October and November and December and hopefully January. Like, is the juice worth the squeeze right now for Saturday? Now we're rehabbing them. We're trying to get them ready to go, and then we'll make a decision as we get closer to the ball game of what that looks like.
Sark's got to find his new ism, CJ. Is the juice worth the squeeze? That's one of my deals, but I digress. So Trey Wisner, doubtful at this point, CJ. I doubt we see Alex January on Saturday. We know they're not going to rush Emmett Mosley back. I would think if there's any doubt about DeAndre Moore, we probably don't see him on Saturday. In other words, when we get to game day, CJ, I don't think anybody should be shocked if that injury report is somewhat lengthy because, as Sark said there, and we've heard this, CJ, all throughout camp, all throughout the preseason, they are not going to push guys unless it's a life or death situation. If there's any shred of doubt early in the season, they'll let a guy rest.
Yeah, you'd like to see them all on the field to grow that rapport with Arch Manning, but at the same time, if this is going to be something that potentially lingers significantly longer into the season, there's absolutely no reason to put them out onto the field. DeAndre Moore, I'm told today, did not practice. He was on the sideline in sweats and a T-shirt, and very much like Trey Wisner, if he is not 100%, there's no reason to put him out on the field. I expect Texas to be without Moore and Wisner this upcoming weekend against their opponent this Saturday. So, look, the real thing for me is, and look, there also wasn't an update on Colin Simmons. However, we expect him to be fine. He was running off the field, smiling, didn't look like he was hampered by anything in the post game. But altogether, Jeff, this provides another opportunity for some of those young cats to get on the field and grow that trust with the coaching staff. We already saw it with Dalen McCutcheon. Expect him to have a much larger role next week, as well as Christian Clark and Jarrett Gibson to try to earn back some of that trust following a fumble on Saturday.
Yeah, I've learned that in some ways, Sark, like a lot of coaches, they'll use us in the media to get a message across to his players. It's nothing he'll tell us that he hasn't already told the team, but he was straight up, CJ. He said, hey, tell these guys, if you want your buddies to play, you want these younger guys to play, then you starters, y'all probably need to do a better job earlier in the game. That way you guys can get out and we can get some new guys in. So, CJ, any final thoughts? UTEP's going to come in here on Saturday, a 3:15 kickoff. It should be hot. It should be soupy. The weather should be probably what you'd expect from an early season kickoff against Texas. An air raid-ish type offense Scotty Walden's going to run with Malachi Nelson. One time was going to be the quarterback of the future at Oklahoma, and he's been well-traveled since then at USC, Boise State, now at UTEP. They'll come in. Ethan Burke said they're expecting a really talented offense that they'll be facing on Saturday when the Miners come to town. So, CJ, whether it's the UTEP game or anything else, any final thoughts as we wrap this up?
Yeah, again, another opportunity for that offensive line to get right. Another opportunity for Arch to grow that confidence. Ethan Burke, to your point, also said that they expect to see a much larger UTEP team than teams in the past of this caliber. You know, UTEP's been very active in the portal this offseason to acquire that size and that talent. Does that mean they can go toe-to-toe with the size and beef on the Texas roster? Perhaps not. Not many teams can. But it will provide a much more difficult test than what Texas saw a week ago against San Jose State, where it was more the undersized speed that provided issues. So different fronts, different looks, different personnel packages, all on display once again. Just get right. Take that step forward rather than the 2 steps forward, 1 step back approach that we've seen previously. It's all about the quarterback and the offensive line getting into a rhythm ahead of SEC play for me, Jeff.
I agree, CJ, and I'll add to that. Look, if you're going to learn tough lessons, better to learn them in non-conference play against overmatched opponents where it's not going to hurt you. But when you learn the lesson, apply it and move forward. All right, CJ, thank you for the knowledge and expertise as always. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it. Thank you to the entire On Texas Football staff, and thanks to our friends at Duck Camp for sponsoring this live edition of On Texas Football. And if you're not a member over at ontexasfootball.com, get over to the site right now. Sign up using the promo code OTFOG. That'll get you 1 year of access at ontexasfootball.com for $39.95. Make sure you like this video and that you're subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel. That way, whether it's here on the channel or over on the site, you're not missing anything before, during, and after every Texas game during the 2025 season. For CJ, for Matthew, the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until next time, hook 'em.